I always say this, Paul George is the second most talented player in the NBA.
And here he goes. Here we go. PG puts on
yeah! Player, I'm talking about the size, the skill set.
Go back in front, 3 minutes to play in the third. George, the cross on Smith, takes it in, corkscrews.
What doesn't he do great?
He's two-way. He's an elite two-way player, which is good enough for me.
Paul George has taken the game over. And here he is at the other end.
Paul George is one of the most versatile players in the NBA today. Yet in his draft class, 9 different franchises passed on him, including 3 teams that selected a better player in the exact same position as him. How is that even possible?
What?
Well, most of these picks were just obvious mistakes. A few had elite talent, and one guy looked like Derrick Rose 2.0.
Here is Wall to the rim. From the corner, putting it down for 3. Hits it. Oh, he still got his bounce.
So, from an NBA nightmare come true to a high school mixtape legend, here's what happened to the 9 players drafted before Paul George. But first, therapy has been a huge part of my life for years. It's helped me through tough times, given me clarity, and is one of the major reasons I felt confident enough to start Henry Hoop's YouTube channel in the first place. Without help from a trusted professional, my life would look a lot different. So that's why I am pumped that today's sponsor is BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. You can have your therapy sessions as a phone call, as a video chat, or even messaging if you prefer that. Whatever is the most comfortable version of therapy for you. To get started, click the link in the description for 10% off your first month. Fill out that questionnaire, which will ask you questions about the challenges you're going through and what kind of therapist you'd like. And then BetterHelp can match a therapist to help you. And if the therapist you're first matched with doesn't feel right, which is common when starting therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. It's so much easier to switch therapists when it's online. So if you think you might benefit from therapy, consider BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/henryhoops. It really helps the channel and gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it's right for you. Now, before diving into the 9 players drafted ahead of PG-13, let's look at why he fell to the 10th pick in 2010 in the first place. The George we know today is one of the most talented players in the NBA. 6'9", athletic, and a great 3-level scorer with a handle. But that wasn't always the case. Coming out of high school, George was only a 3-star recruit. He was ranked 20th best basketball player in California, but that was far below stars like DeMar DeRozan and Drew Holiday. He wasn't heavily recruited and ended up at a mid-major Fresno State. After 2 solid college seasons, he blew up on the NBA's radar for his highlight dunks and gifted scoring ability. Sports Illustrated named him the 8th most interesting player in college basketball. He declared for the NBA draft in March 2010. But the critics weren't totally sold. Some scouts warned that George had a weak handle, was inefficient, and turned the ball over too much. But then other scouts compared him to Scottie Pippen and said that he had elite athleticism and ability to space the floor. One anonymous scout even said, quote, "In 5 years, Paul George will be the best player to come out of this draft. Trust me." So basically, drafting Paul George had some risk, but teams knew they were getting a solid player with a ton of upside. So if Paul George was possibly a Scottie Pippen-like prospect, what about the 9 other players drafted before him? What was their scouting report and what happened to them in the NBA? The first pick in the 2010 NBA draft was
John Wall from the University of Kentucky.
Wall was one of the most exciting high school prospects of all time. His High School Mixtape is the stuff of legends, and coaches were drooling over his mix of athleticism, size, and game sense. At Kentucky, he and another top pick from this draft were primetime TV on a night-to-night basis. In his lone season, Wall was first-team All-American and won the Adolph Rupp Award as the best player in Division I. After going to Washington with the #1 pick, Wall made an immediate impact in the NBA. He averaged 16 points and 8 assists and was a surefire Rookie of the Year if Blake Griffin didn't pull Ben Simmons and win it in his second year. John Wall's lightning speed, handle, and ability to penetrate the defense paired perfectly with the Wizards' 2012 draft pick, Bradley Beal. From 2013 to 2018, Wizards made the playoff each year except for 2016. And according to Wall, LeBron was afraid to play them in the playoffs.
In DC?
Yeah.
That 16-17?
We
was going to beat the shit out of LeBron.
John Wall peaked in 2016 when he averaged 23 points, 10 assists, 4 rebounds, and shot 48% effective field goal percentage. But Wall, like a lot of players on this list, had his career derailed by injuries. After making 5 All-Star games and an All-NBA team, John Wall tore his Achilles in February 2019. He hasn't been the same since then and has jumped from team to team in search of a meaningful role. He went to the Rockets, who needed a veteran to lead the team through a rebuild, but Wall couldn't buy in. After the Rockets traded him, he went on a podcast and ripped into the team.
The Rockets experience.
Trash.
I already know.
I know. Beyond trash. Like,
In July 2022, he signed with the Clippers, and it looked like he was poised to be a point guard on a championship contending team. Wall played 40 games with the team, then got hurt in January, which persuaded the Clippers to trade Wall and sign a healthy Russell Westbrook. Unfortunately, he went back to the Rockets, who immediately waived him. I wouldn't be surprised if the podcast Trash Talk went into their decision. John Wall's career is a brutal reminder of the business of the NBA. The dude had all the talent in the world, his body just let him down. The second pick in the 2010 NBA draft was a player who looked like the future.
Evan Turner from Ohio State University.
A four-star recruit, Evan Turner was a late bloomer. He played 3 seasons at Ohio State. In his junior year, he averaged 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. He swept essentially every major award and led his team to a Big Ten Conference championship. Scouts compared him to Brandon Roy and basically described him as a precursor to Luka Doncic, a 6'7" point guard who you could run your entire offense through. Philadelphia drafted him, and it looked like the type of player to turn a franchise around, both on and off the court. But at the higher level of the NBA, Turner just couldn't cut it. His rookie year, he averaged 7 points and 4 assists. And while he put up better numbers later in his career, Turner just couldn't score the ball efficiently. For his career, he had an effective field goal percentage of 45% and shot 29% from 3. He peaked at 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists on the 2013 Philadelphia 76ers. But that team went 19-63. Turner made such little impact on winning that he was sent to the Pacers at the trade deadline of that season. Looking back, this was an awful pick for the process and Philadelphia. Turner lasted 10 years in the league and had solid moments as a role player, but he didn't live up to the hype. He wasn't the franchise-altering player that was promised. But you can't blame the scouts for that. His resume looked flawless. Today, you can find ET chatting about hoops with Andre Iguodala on their podcast, Point Forward. The third pick in the draft was a high school stud.
Derrick Favors of Georgia Tech.
Derrick Favors was the #1 ranked player in the class of 2009. He was the MVP of the McDonald's All-American game and the MVP of the Jordan Brand Classic. In 1 season at Georgia Tech, he averaged 12 points and 9 rebounds. He was projected as a near-perfect modern big, standing at 6'10" with massively long arms, bounce, and great hands. He could score the ball on the inside and had great instincts on the defensive end too. He seemed like a precursor to Anthony Davis. And Adidas bet on that potential, signing Favors to a multi-year deal before the draft. The New Jersey Nets selected Favors with the 3rd overall pick. His NBA career was solid, but he never dominated the league the way many had hoped. In his rookie year, he averaged 6 points and 5 rebounds per game, then was part of the trade for Deron Williams that sent Favors to the Utah Jazz. Favors found a home in Utah and spent 10 seasons with the Jazz. He became a starting center in 2014 and for 2 years averaged 16 points and 8 rebounds. He had his best game in 2015 when he put up 35 points and 13 rebounds in a win over the Pacers. By the way, Paul George had 48 points in that game. Unfortunately, Favors never evolved past an NBA role player. The Hawks signed him to a 10-day contract in 2023, but he never saw the court. Still, Favors played 12 years in the NBA and made a ton of money doing so. His career earnings rack up to $130 million, which is impressive and a lot more than the majority of guys in his class. The 4th pick in the 2010 NBA draft was
Wesley Johnson of Syracuse University.
Johnson had a convoluted path to the league. As a freshman at Iowa State, Johnson was named to the Big 12 All-Rookie team after averaging 12 points and 8 rebounds per game. In his sophomore season, he plateaued. He averaged less points, rebounds, and shot a worse percentage than the year before. With the lack of growth weighing on him, he transferred to Syracuse. Due to the NCAA transfer rules, he had to sit out the entire season. But the move ended up paying off. Johnson averaged 16 points, 8 rebounds, and 3.5 stocks per game, being named an AP All-American in the process. Even though he was a senior coming out of university, Johnson was projected as an all-star two-way player. He had elite athleticism in a 6'7" frame, a good handle, and a smooth jumper that fit perfectly with the NBA game. Sound like anyone you know? Basically, people thought Johnson would be the player Paul George ended up being. He was selected by the Timberwolves with the 4th pick, but never panned out. He jumped from Minnesota to Phoenix, to the Lakers, to the Clippers, and finally both to the Pelicans and Wizards in 2019. He averaged 7 points, 3 rebounds, and 1 assist per game during his career. After the 2019 season ended, Johnson signed a 1-year deal in the EuroLeague. Unfortunately, his NBA career is over, and most people only remember him from this James Harden highlight.
Offside. Harden just crossed over Wes Johnson. Take a look.
With the 5th pick in the 2010 NBA draft, the Sacramento Kings select
Demarcus Cousins from the University of Kentucky.
DeMarcus Cousins has been in the news quite a bit recently. People are claiming that in his prime, Boogie was as good or better than reigning MVP Joel Embiid and two-time MVP Nikola Jokic. With all due respect to the offensive beast that Boogie was, that take is patently absurd. But still, only the second most absurd take Cousins has been involved in.
I'm glad she's that confident in her abilities, but it's also a little delusional.
I mean, I'm better, but and I know that kind of gets at him, but it's okay. It's okay. It's okay, little man.
Still, Cousins is arguably the best player drafted ahead of Paul George. He was one of those uber-talented players that had almost no physical weaknesses in his game. But the coaches, scouts, and GMs around the league were worried about his attitude. After averaging 15 points and 10 rebounds as a freshman next to John Wall at Kentucky, scouts cited maturity problems and a lack of mental focus for reasons not to select him first or second overall. So Cousins slipped to the 5th pick and went to a city that would accept his personality. In his first season, Cousins averaged 14 points, 9 rebounds, and made the all-rookie first team. Then in 2014, he became a perennial all-star. In 2016, Cousins was arguably the best center in the NBA, averaging 27 points and 11 rebounds. But then again, he also didn't try on defense and routinely led the league in technical fouls.
It's ridiculous. It's obvious what's being done out here. It's on a nightly basis. I hope the world can see now what's really going on out here.
As he got older, he started to mature. But sadly, Cousins' career transformed right when it seemed like we were getting to the good part. In 2017, Demarcus was traded to the Pelicans to pair up with Anthony Davis. It seemed like an awkward fit at first, but the two clicked immediately. The Pelicans had a record of 27-21. Cousins was averaging 25 points, 13 rebounds, and 5 assists, while Davis averaged 28 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. But then, Boogie suffered his season-ending Achilles injuries against the Rockets in January 2018. From that point on, Cousins' career took a series of tragic turns. He joined the Warriors super team in 2018 and averaged 16-8, but suffered another season-ending injury, tearing his ACL. Cousins missed the entire next season due to his injury, and the league kind of gave up on him. From 2021 on, Cousins played for 4 different teams: Houston, the Clippers, Milwaukee, and most recently Denver. His role was reduced and his production plummeted. And to add more salt to the wound, the Warriors, Bucks, and Nuggets all won rings since his departure. Today, DeMarcus Cousins is 33 years old. With his experience and talent, he could definitely play a backup center role in the NBA. But like John Wall, politics and past health issues will probably keep Cousins sidelined indefinitely. The 6th pick in the 2010 NBA draft was
Ekpe Udoh from Baylor University.
Udoh was one of those physically gifted, raw talent prospects we see in every draft class. He stood at 6'10" with a massive 7'5" wingspan and quick feet. Udoh played 2 seasons at Michigan, where he averaged only 5 points and 4 rebounds before transferring to Baylor. Like Wesley Johnson, he was forced to sit out a year. But Udoh's game flourished with the change of scenery. The Nightmare averaged 14 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 blocks per game as a junior. When he declared for the draft, scouts drooled over his defensive potential, but admitted that his game needed a lot of work. Even more concerning, he was already 23 years old. The Warriors took the risk and hoped to mold him into Chris Gatling 2.0. As a rookie, he averaged just 4 points and 3 rebounds per game. He was traded halfway through the following season, bouncing between 4 teams in total of his 7-year career. He never developed any sort of offensive skill set, and at his peak only averaged 5 points per game. He'd be considered a bust by modern standards. But Udoh's basketball career has taken off since he's left the NBA. He's a cult hero in Turkey, where he played for the Fibonacci Sports Club between 2015 and 2017. He also played for the Nigerian national team in the 2020 Olympic Games. In 2023, Udoh took the job as an assistant coach with the Atlanta Hawks. Let's see if his time in the NBA as a coach is more productive than his time as a player. The 7th pick in the 2010 NBA draft was
Greg Monroe from Georgetown University.
As a 5-star recruit coming out of Louisiana, Moose averaged 21 points and 14 rebounds. He was the #1 ranked power forward in America and 2-time Mr. Basketball Louisiana. He went to Georgetown and made an immediate impact, averaging 13 points and 7 rebounds on his way to the Big East Rookie of the Year honors. Despite being projected as a first-round pick, Monroe stayed 1 more year in college. The move was risky, but it worked out. As a sophomore, he averaged a double-double, and scouts loved his unique skill. An agile, low-post player who could overpower a forward, but could also move quicker than a true 7-foot center. Unfortunately, he came into the NBA right as the league was leaving post play in the past. Monroe didn't even make his NBA debut until October 30th and only scored 2 points. He started to turn around his career after that first game, averaging 9 points and 7 rebounds, finishing 6th in Rookie of the Year voting. Over his career, Monroe put up some pretty good numbers and highlights, but it was sort of like Demarcus Cousins, empty stats on bad teams. Between 2011 and 2016, Monroe averaged 15 points and 9 rebounds per game for the Pistons and Bucks. But they never won more than 33 games in those years and never sniffed the playoffs. In 2020, he signed with Bayern Munich of the EuroLeague. Last year, he played in the CBA with former NBA player Kay Felder and vet Jonathan Simmons, and most recently signed a contract with the BSN, which is a league out of Puerto Rico. Watching Moose play, it's easy to imagine him being an all-star in the late 90s or early 2000s. But in the 2010s, he was just a solid role player. Selected by the Los Angeles Clippers with the 8th overall pick, Al-Farouq Aminu was projected to be the perfect jack of all trades. In high school, he was ranked the 7th best player in the nation, ahead of players like Kemba Walker and Marcus Morris. At Wake Forest, he averaged 13 points and 8 rebounds while showing off his freakish athleticism and versatility. After a successful sophomore season, he was a lock as a lottery pick in the 2010 NBA draft. But he immediately struggled to stand out in the league. His lack of defining skill caused him to bounce from team to team, going from the Clippers to the Hornets to the Mavs and finally to Portland, all before he turned 25. In Portland, he found the perfect fit as a Swiss Army knife next to one of the most elite scorers in NBA history, Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard somehow had 5 players selected before him in 2012, and if you want to see why, be sure to check out my in-depth video. Aminu thrived next to Lillard, averaging 10.6 rebounds and shooting 36% from 3. Aminu had a few more solid seasons in Portland before being traded to Orlando in 2019. On December 1st of that year, the Magic announced that Aminu had a torn meniscus and was out indefinitely. His NBA career kind of ended there. In 2021, the Magic sent him to the Chicago Bulls along with Nikola Vucevic. But that was just a short stop because a few months later, Aminu was traded again for DeMar DeRozan in a blockbuster trade. Aminu had a solid NBA career and continues to represent the Nigerian basketball team in international play. With the 9th pick in the 2010 NBA draft, the Utah Jazz select
Gordon Hayward from Butler University.
Gordon Hayward was a cult hero at Butler. In his 2 seasons there, Hayward was key to one of the best teams in college basketball. He averaged 15 points and 8 rebounds as a sophomore. He led the 5-seed Butler Bulldogs on a Cinderella story at March Madness, coming within inches of winning the national championship over Duke.
Midcourt launches the shot. Oh, it almost went in!
In the NBA, he started off slow, but developed into one of the best two-way players in the league. In 2017, he averaged 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists for the Utah Jazz, who finished 5th in the West and lost in the second round to the Golden State Warriors. That offseason, he was traded to the Boston Celtics for a haul of picks and young players. On a bigger stage, with a better team, Hayward seemed poised to break out. Then this happened.
His own legacy. What better way with this young team? This is the guy that probably hit the biggest shot in Cavs history.
They're going up. Oh, my goodness. Hayward came down so hard. Okay, Hayward broke his leg. Hayward has broken his leg. Hayward has broken his leg.
Seconds into his very first game with the Celtics, Hayward snapped his ankle, and his whole career flipped upside down. He was traded to the Hornets in 2020 and has been a good role player, averaging 16 points and 5 rebounds, but has struggled to stay on the court, never playing more than 50 games in a season since the injury. Even when he does play, he clearly doesn't have the explosiveness that helped him be so special. In the last few years, Gordon has faced setback after setback, but maybe he can finish his career strong and lead a young Hornets team to the playoffs for the first time in nearly a decade. And finally, with the 10th pick of the 2010 NBA draft, the Indiana Pacers selected
Paul George of Fresno State University.
In hindsight, the NBA scouting reports on Paul George were fairly accurate. Athletic small forward with a ton of upside if he works hard. And work hard, he certainly did. In his NBA debut, he had just 4 points on 1 of 5 shooting. But PG immediately bounced back later that year against the Wizards when he knocked down 5 threes and finished the game with a career-high 23 points. In 2013, the Pacers made a huge bet and traded away Danny Granger, essentially making a 22-year-old the face of their franchise. With more experience and responsibility, PG evolved into an elite 3-level scorer and strong defender. Over his career, he's made 6 All-NBA teams, 8 All-Star games, and 4 All-Defensive teams. He also led the league in steals, and in 2019 averaged an insane 28 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals per game. He even went head-to-head with a prime LeBron James in multiple playoff series, and only looked like the slightly worse player, which is a massive compliment. But that story always seems to be the perception of Paul. Close, but not good enough. He didn't quite make the NBA 75 list. He almost won an NBA MVP, finishing 3rd in 2019. And of course, never won an NBA championship. But playoff P's chances aren't over. The Clippers are considered a title contender this year if they can keep a healthy Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on the front court. Only time will tell. So, should 9 players have been drafted before Paul George in 2010? No way. But we have the benefit of hindsight today. Paul George is by far the greatest player from his draft class. He's a surefire Hall of Famer. If you don't believe me, then just enjoy this montage of Paul George completely humiliating your favorite players.
Here comes George, got the step and smokes. Paul George, pull-up jumper, got it. George on the pull-up, nails it. Drives in on Bullock. He goes to the house. Oh my! George. Here we go, step back three. Oh!